creative aging. We are going to do a patriotic project today for our veterans. And so this would be good to get ready for Veterans Day, or it could be a good Christmas present. Anything you want to do with these. They can either be made into magnets. So if that, everybody can use a magnet. You can make them into ornaments if you want to put a hole in it like we did on the last project. And then with ribbon, or you can make them into a brooch if you want to have a pin that's glued to the back. And so you can go a lot of different directions with this. I'm going to show you just the basic technique, and then you can go off on your own. And you could go as detailed as you want. Like this one's got a lot more etching and a lot more work on it. Or if you just want to kind of go simple, you can. This is just, we're going to do this one today. It's kind of an organic shape, so you don't need as many tools. But if you have a cookie cutter that you'd like to use, so I have this Oklahoma cookie cutter and then a heart one. So if you have a cookie cutter in a shape that you'd like to use, feel free to bring that out for this project. And so this one, obviously just proud Oklahoman. And this is an American flag heart. Okay, so we're using the polymer clay, and let's go ahead and get that out. As always, warm it up in your hand before you start working. You will need a rolling pin. If you do not have a polymer clay rolling pin, you can use, a jar or a can, anything you do. So just look around your house and find something if you don't have this kind of rolling pin. And then after it's warmed up in your hand, gonna roll it. Remember to flip. Always roll slow. I know a lot of people, they want to go really fast and hard. They just, it's just better to go slower because then you can get it really even all the way across. When you go fast, you usually press harder in one spot, and you don't want these to look uneven. And this also helps with preventing from little bubbles. All right, so now we've got a good thickness. So especially if that's going to be a magnet or an ornament, that's a really good thickness. And so you can keep it this big if you want it to just be kind of an organic shape. If you want to cut something out, then you need to roll it to that size. So that's going to be totally up to you. I'm going to leave it this shape, and I'm going to grab my pencil. My sad little dirty clay pencil that we've used before, so everybody should know how to do this. And if you want to do an eagle, we'll go ahead and do the eagle because the other ones are more painting and they're pretty easy. So we're going to go ahead and do an eagle. And you can look at something, or if you just want to make your own, then do that. And so remember to make sure the tip of your pencil is clean, and you don't really need any other tool. You just draw into your clay today. So make sure that there are no marks in it before you start. And be careful of how you put your hand. You don't want to squish any of the clay. And go ahead and just maybe practice drawing an eagle first. And then you can go ahead and do it in the clay easier. And we're going to go over this a few times to get the lines really smoothed out. And so remember to clean your clay tool. And it's definitely good to practice on paper first. But one good thing about this is if you don't like your drawing, you just squish this ball of clay up and start over. And so I want you to see how this is looking So see that little chunk? We want to get that off. You can roll it off, you can push it into the clay and smooth it. You don't want all these chunks just floating around because it will show when we put either pigment or paint on it. I feel like we do so many projects that, you know, more women would love to have, you know, with butterflies and flowers. And this is a great project for your male veterans. They really enjoy getting things like this. And you can really personalize it. Like say on this one, I mean, you could put details of their branch, you can put their name on it. I mean, so this is a great project to personalize it so it's meaningful. So I'm going over these lines a few times and then I'm smoothing it. And I'll show you up close here in a minute. And we're going to make this head a little bigger, so I'm going over this line again. I wanted that head to be more rounded. So I want you to see how messy it looks. Obviously, we are not leaving it like this. So don't think you're done just because you drew it. It really takes a lot of detail work to do this kind of drawing. And so let's go back over the lines. And if you have other clay tools, please feel free to bring those out because other clay tools might be helpful and they have more of a rounded edge. This is quite a bit of a point. I don't like it actually with this big of a point. I'm going to switch pencils. I like a little dull myself because it doesn't make such sharp lines. So I'm going to switch to one that has a little bit more, less of an edge. So I'm going to go over these lines again. And as I go, I'm just going to clean my pencil out after every line. And then I'm also going to smooth it. So right there, see that chunk that just came off? I want to get that off. There, I don't want it. So just use your finger lightly and smooth how the edges were lifted, and it'll look a lot better. You're doing the same thing over and over again, but that's what's going to make it look good. And then, so this edge got lifted, so I'm smoothing it with my finger. And sometimes you can add texture to cover up some of these. That's always good too. So let's go over these lines over here. Same thing, just go over it again, make it a little bit deeper. And then clean that off and smooth it. And so I turn it around so that I'm not putting my fingers on it. And you notice I'm being really gentle and I'm using this part of my finger. I don't want any nails getting in my art, because that's more work for you to do to smooth it. So you might as well just avoid that in the first place and make it easier. And then you're just going to keep working on it. You want this outline to be really polished before we start doing the feather work. So it's kind of repetitive. You're drawing and smoothing and then drawing more and then Okay, that's looking better. As you can see, I want you to notice there's a bubble right there. I don't really want that bubble there. So let's move it and kind of push on it and smooth it out, and it will move that air. Sometimes that happens when you're working with clay. You're just gonna get a little air bubble. With this project especially, the air bubbles will be noticeable when you paint or put pigment on it. Sometimes, you know, the texture, you won't notice it as much. But with this one, especially if it's a magnet, you just need to get those air bubbles out. Okay, so I think that looks good. Now let's get an eye. Figure out where your eye is going to be and just draw an eye. So I did a circle and then I kind of tapped on top just to clean it up, the edge of it. So now this is the fun part. Just draw some kind of marks. And don't draw these marks as deep as the outline. So you can just kind of do light. You want to give it the texture of feathers. And you want to also create movement in your drawing. So like this one, show you up close. I did kind of V's. And then in the head, I just did, I wanted to give it, I wanted to go along with the curve of it. So you can look at a picture of an eagle to do this part if you want. But you don't want them to be straight. You want it to look more natural. So these are going to be light. And so play with the pressure of your pencil and how you're using it. And then down here, you can kind of start doing some V's. And you don't want, start out small. Like you don't want too many. You can always add more later. It's harder to take them away. And remember, clean your pencil off. I know you can get in a zone and not clean your pencil. I do it too. But this will help with the extra balls of clay, and you won't have as much to tidy up later. Okay, so I'm smoothing, just barely touching this just to get off any excess clay that I didn't get. And now at this point, you can do more. You can leave it. I'm going to do a little bit more. And I might even go lighter. So I'm going to go a little lighter so they're not all exactly the same. Because with feathers, some of them are going to be sticking out more than others. Okay, now I want you to pick it up and really look at all the edges. So turn it, smooth out every edge, and I want you to be really detailed. I want you to look at every inch of this to make sure it looks good. So go to every edge and turn it gently and just make sure it looks good. We did a lot of drawing today, so there might be like little chunks of clay that you can smooth off. And then look at the top of it again and make sure it looks good before we put pigment on it. So I don't know what everyone has at home for supplies. So I'm going to do a couple things to this. I know some of you have the pigment. So I'm going to brush it with the pigment, and this goes on before you bake it. Now, some of these, I want you to notice. Now this has pigment, so I did pigment first, and see how shiny that is? The pigment's awesome because it really looks like metal. And so if you're wanting to do a dog tag or you want this to look metal, then the pigment's excellent. This is acrylic paint. So this one has pigment and paint on it. And this one's all just paint. So some of you don't have acrylic paint, and if you do acrylic paint on these, you have to do a little gloss. and it's Sculpey brand, and they have a jar of it, and it's called Sculpey Gloss Glaze. And it's about $7 for a bottle, but this will last forever. But this is what you have to have on top of acrylic paint. Acrylic paint and the polymer clay doesn't mix well, so it will get goopy and it'll scratch off. So I put a glaze on all of these so that it doesn't scratch off and it stays pretty shiny. So if you don't want to do the paint, you can just do the pigment. We're going to do that right now. And so I recommend you can either, put this on cardboard or a paper plate to catch any excess. And I usually dump it out if you're doing it with a group. If you're doing it by yourself and you're just using one color, you can go right out of the jar. But if it's a group of people, you probably need to have it on a plate and to keep it clean. You don't want to, this pigment, you don't want to waste any of it. And so just brush it on. Make sure to tap wherever there's deeper grooves that you used with your pencil, because then it will drop in there and make that shiny. So I'm tapping on top of where I drew. So just use this pigment like paint. Then after you have all your grooves done, then you can just move your paintbrush. Make sure it's a soft paintbrush, because if you do a coarse paintbrush, you will see the bristles in this clay. So this one's a really soft one, so I won't see any other marks. But if you do those marks on purpose, I'm all about it. Experimenting is always good for art. So I'm going over this a couple times because I want to make sure it's really shiny. And I'll hold it up. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to make sure to get all my edges, and if it's an ornament, you might want to do the back of it too. So I'm just going to show you. So see, you just paint it on top, and this pigment soaks into the clay so that when you bake it, it will stay just the way you see it now. So let's do the edges. And this is where you really want to have a plate, because it drops down and you don't want to waste it. You can always recycle this back into the jar as long as it's not mixed with any other colors. And you can always, whatever falls down, you can use. Then you could do the back. All right, so go bake this for 12 minutes at 275 degrees. Make sure it's cooled all the way. And if you do want it to be an ornament, you need to get your paper clip and poke a hole in it at the top. If you want it to be a magnet, just bake it as is. We'll glue the magnet on after. Okay, so this has been baked. And so it's ready to paint, or you can leave it as is if you just want it to be silver. And then you can just glue with super glue a magnet on the back. They sell all kinds of magnets at pretty much any store, any hardware store, any craft store. Or, you can make that into an ornament. So if you want to leave it, you can. If you'd like to paint it, then you can use acrylic paint of any kind. I'm just going to use some blue. And you just need a small, really any size brush. It just depends on what kind of design you did, but we're not going to do detailed painting right now because that's probably a totally different project that we need to focus on just detailed painting. So I'm going to make it a little simple and just do a little color. And I'd like to keep this, I love the pigment. I don't want to totally cover it up. I think it's just so pretty. So I'm going to leave some of the pigment. So I'll just do the outside blue. And make sure that your piece is already cooled, because if you start painting on it while it's still hot, it will get goopy. It just gets really thick and it starts sticking and it gives it an odd texture. So, and if you're going to do paint this way, make sure to get the edges. So go all the way down, and I'm going to kind of paint in the direction, so you know you're going to see these paint lines. So I want to create a little more movement by moving my brush out. So instead of going back and forth, I'm going from my eagle out. And then all the way down on the edges. So just move it, just keep moving it. Be careful with the acrylic paint because it doesn't wash up very easily. So I just got some on my finger. I'm going to make sure not to touch my eagle with that finger because you're pretty much going to have to paint the whole thing if you get this blue on your pigment. You're going to have to just, which actually that's probably what happened with this American flag heart over here. Because I wanted to leave some of the pigment and then I messed up, so I just painted the whole thing. So now this part, a little tricky. I'm going to hold it up for a minute, show you. I'm going to make sure I don't touch it with my paint on my fingers. Okay, so see, I want you to notice the kind of directional lines. It's hard to see, but you up close, you'll definitely notice it. Now we need to get this in between the beak. You might want to switch to the smallest brush for this part. Or a brush with a better edge that's controlled. So a small brush or it's just something that you can really have good control over. And so I'm going to go in and paint in there. And if you do get it a little bit in the wrong place, you can use your finger or paper towel and move it away while it's still wet. But once it dries, it's there. And you can, of course, mix your own colors. Okay, I'm going to set that down for a minute, and I want to show you up close some of the other ones. So this one, you know, I just went ahead and I actually drew out the stripes so that they were really straight. So if you do want to do an American flag design, you can draw with pencil and you don't have to do the pigment on this one. So you could go straight to paint and draw out your lines to make sure that it's all straight, and then you just have to carefully paint. You can actually paint little stars or you could just do dots. If actually drawing tiny stars with a tiny brush, if that's overwhelming, then you can do dots, that's fine. And then see how I did the edges? The same. Same with this one. I did little dots instead of stars to make it a little easier. Make sure, you know, the edges make it look finished. So don't forget the edges. This one, so now that you've seen the process, this was the pigment. I did the drawing, of course, and then I just added a little bit of the blue paint and a little bit of the red, but I left the pigment to show. And the eagle. So now at this point, let it dry, and then you want to paint your glaze on top of it, just a very light layer of this gloss, and then let it dry again, and then you can glue your magnet on the back or a brooch, or you know, whatever you want to do with these things. You can finish it how you'd like. All right, thanks.